I'm Garreth Tigwell from the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I will be presenting the paper called Household Surface Interactions, Understanding User Input Preferences and Perceived Home Experiences. This work was done with Mike Crabb from the University of Dundee, and we would like to thank Carnegie Trust who provided funding, as well as the participants who made this project possible. The main message that I want you to take away from this research is that surface texture can provide an enhanced user experience during different interactions. So there's a long history of augmented reality research, in particular room scale experiences. We have spatially augmented reality, which can extend interfaces into the real world, and researchers had an early vision of using this for the office of the future. But for AR, entertainment is a big market, and one system that I usually highlight when talking about this is the Microsoft IllumiRoom. I find it very interesting, and basically Microsoft are using projection to expand the game world into the real world. Research has looked at minimizing the issue of projecting an image onto a 3D environment and minimizing the interference, such as the patterns and colors from the real world, but we know little about the intersection between the touch gestures and the surface material textures themselves, if people are interacting with them. So this is the Sony projector that runs Android, and it has various sensors, but it costs about $1,700 in US. And it's not cheap, but eventually this technology is going to be within our homes, and so it's the perfect time to find out how people might use it. So we ran a mixed method study to find out the role that texture plays in user experience during interaction, and what limitations people saw, if there were any, to try and use this device at home. So we call this household surface interactions, and we had two main research questions. So the first, what surface characteristics do users find pleasant or uncomfortable to interact with, and does a link between the touch gesture and the surface used, does a link exist between the touch gesture and the surface used for interaction? And the second, what challenges do users perceive exist when using HSI within their homes, and where are the opportunities for future smart home integration? So the strangest thing that we did during this project was go and ask carpet stores and other stores if they had samples for us that we could take for free. Unfortunately, I don't have the photos of the looks that people gave us, but you can imagine that many people were surprised that this counts as genuine research. These images only reveal a small amount of what we collected. There were 9 materials in total that we used for the study, 3 different carpets on the top row, 3 different types of tiles or slate on the middle, and 3 hard surfaces such as acrylic and wood on the bottom of that image. And this image shows those surfaces again, but with the color projection, so that you can see the differences in reflectivity, as well as the difference in texture such as the wood grain. So we created tasks that would make participants use 5 common gestures, such as tapping, dragging, holding, pinching, and swiping. And there were 2 versions of each, so for example, dragging vertical and dragging horizontal. So this is part of the setup for this study with the AR projector. So we designed a 3D mount which we could quickly and easily swap out, so that it varied in height for the different textures that we were using. And participants would do 10 trials in a random order for each surface. After the trial, for a particular surface, the participant would answer several questions before repeating with the next surface. And the questions were designed to get participants to focus on the experience of interacting with the different textures, especially the different types of gestures, but participants could also comment on other aspects of the study if they needed to. And the surface material order was counterbalanced as well. So I have a video to show you I'll just hit play. So the video is just to provide you with a sense of what it was like to carry out the different tasks on textured surfaces. But I want to comment on a couple of things from this video. So this isn't a video with one of our participants. The room in this video is more brightly lit than the one that was in the study. And the second comment that I have, you might notice there's a rainbow effect that you can see. This is a result of the video recording of the projector using a smartphone. So you can see as someone's going through the trials here, they're doing the different gestures, such as in this one, they're dragging the circles in a vertical order. They can indicate when they're ready to do the next task, for example, as well. So again, this is another holding task, but there's a longer time delay. And I'll just reiterate again that during the main study, while these are showing in a particular order, they were actually randomized for each participant. So we've got our last type of gesture, which is swiping. And again, they can swipe, but this time they have to do a vertical action to get rid of the circles. So after the participants completed the interaction trials, they would move over to the seating area and take part in an interview. The focus of the interview was for the participants to reflect on the experience and what it would mean to have a device like this in their home. The purpose of the interview was to provide additional qualitative data for our research questions. We ran some qualitative analysis on the data, but I will encourage you to read the paper for those details. For this talk, I want to provide more insights into the qualitative data we collected. So it was interesting that the surface rated as easiest to complete touch gestures on was a dark wooden surface, which has some amount of texture rather than a surface that was completely smooth, and maybe more similar to the screens that we're used to interacting with on our smartphone devices. So we had an acrylic surface that kind of had that sort of very smooth glass-like texture. Our participants provided comments on their initial reactions after using each surface, and that was important. But obviously during the interview as well, there was a chance to reflect on the overall experience. And one of the things that was most interesting was how varied the participants were in their preference for different surface textures. So a balance needs to be met between a desired texture and image clarity. So regarding image clarity, this is not a new finding, but we need to think of it in relation to texture, which was the point of our study. So some participants really liked the soft texture of carpets, but the softest carpet was also the most illegible. So this example on the screen. So sometimes though we need to think about the tasks that we're doing, and you don't need to see fine detail. So on this surface, for example, trying to read a blog post or written text is going to be very difficult. But if you're wanting to do something like painting, then that's something that's actually okay as long as it's not fine detailed painting. So you can imagine young children wanting to paint on a carpet, and they can do this without actually making a mess. So our participants found texture to be both a positive and negative experience. The softer textures of the carpet were appealing for reasons such as this I pressed a button feeling. I thought this was really interesting, people forgetting the material is not connected to the device in any way. But there was also this idea of dynamic interference. The long fibers of carpet can move and cause interference with the projector. So although it is a really soft material that people might like the touch of or the feel of, it isn't always practical. So considering what surfaces you have at home is therefore quite important, especially when acknowledging that a device like this is quite expensive. if you're going to buy an augmented reality projector, you don't really want it to just sit at a desk in the corner of a room. And the device does have its own batteries, so you can move it around the house. Sometimes the textures and 3D surfaces could add to the experience. But in certain situations, there would be interference. So participant 10 said, weirdly enough, I choose tapping as a good one because there were certain angles which I guess were ergonomic, I suppose. Because it's at an angle, it's easier to tap. And another participant said the ridges were kind of interrupting the flow, initially anyway, and then I found myself just having a lighter touch over time, and that seemed to work. So in some instances, the texture itself enhanced the experience, but in others it was not as straightforward as that. Some participants talked about the idea of this as a bridge between the physical and the digital world. Participant 7 said it's like you actually feel like you're interacting with it instead of just touching the surface. But again, there were some negatives. It's not always suitable if the interactions don't line up with the material. And so participant 30 said it was very satisfying to do a vertical drag on a vertical grain on the wood, but it kind of accelerated where I was going. But only if you're obviously going exactly in that direction. So if you had to drag horizontally on that surface, it wouldn't necessarily provide a good user experience. So our paper outlines ideas for designing for surface interactions. So again, I would encourage you to read the paper, but I just want to provide a high-level overview of some things to consider. So people have different preferences for interaction types on different surfaces. So let's think about maximizing the user experience by making the device smarter. So currently the projector doesn't really know what the context that it's being used in. But there is other technologies such as RadarCat, which is a previously published piece of research by another group of researchers. And it's one piece of technology that could do this. So it can identify different material types. Imagine you as the user have determined how you like to interact with different materials. Say that you like dragging on carpet but not on wood. If you are using the system on a carpet and move it onto the desk, what I'm imagining is that the system now detects the wooden surface of the desk and remaps all dragging controls. So if you're listening to music, for example, rather than a slider to change the volume, you would then be presented with a positive and a negative icon button so that you can tap instead. And this might be one way to improve this technology. The second thing is that household surface interactions can improve where smartphones fall short. So cooking was one case participants kept thinking about. Nobody likes to get their screen dirty while following a recipe. But with this, you can now project onto the surface you're working on. And so participants saw this as very useful in their own home environment. They also discussed the potential benefits of within education by providing a sensory active learning sessions that could be designed with this, or even enhancing gaming experiences. So one participant imagined special textured boards that could be projected on, so you can play, for example, Angry Birds and feel more connected to the game. The third point is that our homes can be busy places, which can cause lots of potential interaction problems. So for example, lighting changes throughout the day. And one funny example that I like to kind of end this talk on was from participant 24, who said that the cat would be interested in it and probably walk in front of it and things like that and press buttons. So we do have some way to go with improving these experiences, but the technology is at a place where we can still influence its development before it becomes commonplace in the home. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and encourage that you read the paper.